What's going on, guys? This is the Edge DFS. We're talking showdown for Cardinals versus Seahawks Thursday night football. My name is Tyson Smith. Ellie, what's going on, man? Ellie Hernandez, how are you?
Pretty good, man. Just getting settled in. It's a different time of day for the show, so I apologize, guys, if you hear any whining dog or kids running around in the background. And right on cue, my puppy starts whining.
There he is.
But we're here for you, right? And we're ready to break down this Cardinals slate. I guess Cardinals Seahawks. My bad. Obviously, I'm a little biased.
We'll try to be not biased in this video here as best as we can. Because at the end of the day, we want to win money, so we're not gonna be too much of fans here. All right, let's just get right into it here. So I want to relive an amazing moment from last week.
Shotgun. Murray out of the pocket. 7 seconds. 6 seconds. Murray heaves it downfield. It is. Oh, it's caught. It is caught. DeAndre Hopkins. Miraculous. It's Murray magic.
All right, so what are your thoughts on that play? I mean, the game was over. I was about to shut the fucking game off. I was so pissed.
So the first thing I want to call out here is Cardinals fans don't deal with stuff like that. We don't get the opportunity to win games like that. That's not in our favor. It doesn't happen. So I'm with you. The game was over to me. But there's a couple things, man. That first of all, that throw was perfect. DeAndre Hopkins called for the ball at like the 5-yard line with triple coverage. Like, it was just disrespectful. He put up his hand then, and then he came down with it. And at no point did he question whether or not he was going to question it or catch it. And again, that's just not something you get from Cardinals players. So it was pretty spectacular, man. Exactly. But my favorite part of the whole thing was this video with Mason Cole. He got off a block, saw the throw, and then just started running around the field screaming like a 13-year-old girl at a Jonas Brothers concert, man. It was wild. But it's on Twitter. If you guys follow us there, you can go watch it. I'm sure I've been spamming everybody's feeds with, different angles and shit. So check it out.
I love it. All right, so let's get into this matchup here. So we've got Cardinals visiting Seattle. Looks like the weather is going to be a slight issue, mostly just rain. So when it comes to football, not a huge deal, but if it's raining too much, you can, the pass game can be affected slightly, at least the deep passes. So it looks like Seattle's minus 165 in this game. It's a 57.5 total. It was a 3.5 spread, and that moved closer to the Cardinals here, so it's straight up -3 for Seattle. When you look at this, and then ownership is coming in heavily on Seattle. So when you take a look at this, what are some things that pop out to you when it comes to this? I know they're playing in Seattle, but we'll get into the whole Cardinals being successful in Seattle in a minute. But tell me just first reaction to these numbers.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not something that I'm too shocked with. Seattle at home is a force to be reckoned with, except for when they're playing the Cardinals, like you were kind of alluding to. And the line opened at 3.5, and I think that movement kind of gives some respect to the Cardinals. But again, I think it was pretty much a pick'em, and it will be a pick'em at this point. So that's where kind of those points are going right now. They'll give the advantage to the home team, unless that home team's the Cowboys or the Jets. But I honestly, I think this is going to open some interesting possibilities up for roster construction. And again, not to be a homer here, but if Arizona is going to be coming in low owned compared to the field, I have no issues getting as much of them as possible. Remember, they're still the number one offense in total yards. And they have to be up there with points per game. There's just no possible way that they aren't. So, again, that's a lot of fantasy points to be dealing with. And I really think it's going to open up some unique leverage by stacking a little bit more Arizona than going Seattle heavy. But again, I think that ownership is kind of just based on the fact that nobody really expects. You kind of expect to split your division games. Obviously, that's not a real world expectation for head coaches. But at the end of the day, you expect to win the home one, lose the away one, and that's kind of where I think this line is established for the moment, at least.
It's going to be tough. I mean, it's going to be tough for Arizona to beat Seattle twice in 1 year, obviously. But I don't think the Seattle at home is as big of an advantage as it has been in the past. Obviously, no fans. So that's an interesting thing. There's no 12th man. So the advantage is slightly less than typical. Obviously, you have travel, you have to stay in a hotel. There's obvious benefits to being at home. But in this case, if you look at the Cardinals, this is from Mike Jarecki, Cardinals insider. Arizona has a 5-2 record at CenturyLink Field dating back to 2013, including a 4-1 record in its last 5 visits. Seattle is 42-11 at home against the rest of the NFL since 2013. So, if you look at the Cardinals since 2002, they have 8 road wins against Seattle in CenturyLink Field. So, something to consider here. I don't, who knows if that'll actually play into this week's matchup, but typically speaking, Seattle's really good at home, and I think this year is just going to be slightly different, and especially against the Cardinals, I think it's not as much of an advantage. So let's talk a little bit about injuries here. So when it comes to Seattle, let me see if I can find my injuries here. When it comes to Seattle, we're looking at Chris Carson is doubtful, and Carlos Hyde is questionable. So let's actually listen to Pete Carroll talk about these guys, get a better idea as to where they're going to go.
Yeah, well, just Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde, either of them. But where do you think you guys stand with those guys right now?
I'm told that Carlos is going to go today in our work. Chris is working to get back. He's trying to make it. Carlos is a little bit ahead of him now, and so we'll see how it goes. I can't tell you what's going to happen Thursday night yet, but both those guys are trying hard this week to get back.
It doesn't seem hopeful for Chris Carson, in my opinion. I think, and it that shows in the injury report. He's listed as doubtful. So, keep an eye on Chris Carson as we get closer. I'm likely to just fade him in general, even if he does even if he does play, because he's injury prone. I mean, if they suit him up and he plays, he could still get injured mid game, or maybe they're going to limit him. I just don't trust playing him. And when it comes to Carlos Hyde, seems like he's closer to actually possibly starting, but it's one of those things we just don't know. They have a total of like 5 running backs. We'll get into their running backs here in a minute, but Carlos Hyde, it's sort of a risk. Now, when it comes to Tyler Lockett, he's listed as questionable, but I don't think you really have to worry. Let's listen to Pete Carroll on Tyler Lockett.
To Tyler, and what's Tyler Lockett he's listed with a knee injury, and then at this moment in time, what do you think his outlook is for the game Thursday?
Yeah, he's got a bit of a knee sprain. In general, he's already had it checked out and MRI and all that kind of stuff. So he's a little bit discomfort, a little bit of swelling today, but it's not a serious knee injury. So we'll look to see how he does day to day and take it till Thursday.
So the key words are discomfort and swelling. He's going to be fine, but at the same time, it's possible he may not be as explosive as usual. Just something to keep an eye on from here. When you go over to the Cardinals side, there's really no issues really to talk about. You have Darrell Daniels, who is questionable for Week 11. I don't really think that's a big deal. He's at 2,600, so he could have been a dart throw, but I don't really think there's anything really to talk about when it comes to the Cardinals and their injury situation. Let's move over to ownership and just kind of chat about ownership here. We have some ownership available. Obviously, we're not going to give away subscriber information from other sites, but just to give you guys an idea on the top 3. Ellie, do you have the ownership pulled up or no?
No, I don't.
Okay. Just to look at sort of the top 3 players here, we've got obviously Wilson and Murray are projected to be in pretty much every lineup. They're the top 2 projected. Then it's a little bit of a fall off. You got Lockett and Hopkins next. And for some reason, Carson is projecting, over 30%. So, you have your usual suspects: Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Tyler Lockett, Hopkins, Metcalf. And then from there, it's a little bit of a drop off. It starts to actually spread out. Anything jump out to you when it comes to, look, Russell Wilson's 73% owned around there, and Kyler Murray's around 70% owned as well. And in the captain, they're above 20%. It's slightly surprising to me that both of these guys aren't higher. I know it's just a more of a roster construction thing, but me personally, I want to get both quarterbacks in every single lineup. There's no reason to fade these guys considering Kyler Murray's rushing upside, his passing upside, and Russell Wilson can go off for 4 or 5 touchdowns as well. What are your thoughts on the ownership coming in here? Anything sticking out to you, like on the low end as well?
Yeah, it seems like the ownership is pretty much kind of centralized at the top of the ladder, right? We're looking at kind of the higher price guys. And it's expected. It was pretty much anticipated, given they're going to get a majority of the volume. But there is one particular guy that I want to call out that seems absurdly low on Christian Kirk, and he's sub 10%. I think he might even be sub 5%. Granted, these are initial projections that are including Chris Carson and other players that are likely be inactive. So I fully anticipate that number to go up. But if that's the case, that's just an egregious under ownership. I don't care what his price is.
Yeah.
He's got 6 touchdowns in the last 4 games, and that's including a game where he had no touchdowns on Sunday.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be paying a very close attention to that, because he becomes one of my favorite plays on the slate if his ownership is even remotely close to anything under 25%.
Dude, he's projected under 5% right now. I think it must be some sort of weirdness, because there's no chance that, I mean, look, I think he being around 10% is probably possible, but because of his price tag at 7,400, it's impossible to fit him in a lineup with Lockett, or Hopkins and both quarterbacks. It's almost impossible unless you get a $200 captain or something. It's really difficult to fit him in. So I think the ownership will be under on him, simply because he's one of these guys that you can't fit in. You just can't fit in your lineups. Yep. All right, so let's move over to our breakdown here. We're going to go through each position. If you guys wouldn't mind throwing us a like real quick, just pop that like button, subscribe. We're doing showdown shows every single showdown slate. Next week for Thanksgiving, we're going to have 3 separate showdown videos for each of those matchups. So subscribe, check us out. Let's move on. Breakdown. Kyler Murray is at 13,000, which is pretty high. We saw Cam Newton the other day really high. We saw Lamar Jackson pretty high. Kyler Murray, he deserves to have a high price tag, but the tough thing is getting also Russell Wilson at 11.8K, which is also pretty high for a quarterback. Having both of these guys in each lineup is going to be difficult. You're going to have to get really creative. It's an art form at this point, fitting all of these guys into your lineups. Ellie, how are you handling the Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson? Are you fading any of these guys? And when I say fade, are you going to be under the field at all?
No. Absolutely not. I will try to get every lineup to have both of these guys in there. If I have to start sacrificing one of the players, I think it would be I might have a couple of lineups without Russell Wilson, but Kyler Murray is a stone cold lock for me, and Russell Wilson, he's about as damn close as you can get to that as well.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not sure how to explain it any other way than that. Kyler Murray obviously has the rushing upside. I think he has a rushing touchdown in every game this season. And yes, I fully anticipate there's going to be some mean regression here, but I mean, what the hell is that? Is it, 70 yards rushing and no touchdowns? I mean, again, that's still incredible upside that you're getting from the quarterback position. And he's going to score. The only thing that I'll say specifically on these two is I won't have either a captain, just given their high price tag.
Yeah.
I think this is a week where you go a little bit more value in the captain spot so that you can jam both these guys into every lineup. And here's the thing on the other side of the ball, right? If I'm not going to get much exposure to DK or Lockett, then I absolutely need to have Russell in, because he's going to capture those points that I'm losing by not playing those wide receivers. And again, I mean, you're going to have the opportunity for Russ. He could end up throwing a touchdown to Will Disley and David Moore, and then Jacob Hollister not get one to his wide receiver. You're going to need all those touchdowns.
Yeah.
And I think you have a better opportunity of getting a more diverse passing attack from Russell Wilson than you would from, say, Kyler Murray. He's going to throw to Hop, Fitz, or Kirk, or one of the running backs. So again, you have a little bit more flexibility playing Russ in your lineups, because then I don't think you necessarily need to capture as much on the Seattle side. But long story short, I'll have both. Whatever I need to do, I'll die on that hill. If I lose all my money playing both of them, I will not think I did anything wrong in my builds.
Look, unless both of these guys or one of these guys gets injured, there's no way that they don't show up in the optimal, in my opinion. I'm pretty damn sure on that. If you look at Kyler Murray's fantasy box score here, his low this season was 24.12 fantasy points. You're gonna end up in the optimal in a showdown slate unless both these teams go off for 100 points and somehow, Hopkins has 4 receiving touchdowns or something crazy like that. There's no way that Kyler Murray doesn't make it into the optimal. There's just no way. The question is, do you put either one of these guys at captain? I think Kyler, he's coming in at under 25% in the captain. That's a lot less than what we've seen in recent showdown slates with Lamar and 2 showdown slates with Cam Newton. Those guys were in the 35% ownership. So you're getting a little bit of an ownership discount simply because he's so expensive. But a guy like Kyler Murray who can score 2 rushing touchdowns easily, like no doubt about it, and also can throw for 2 or 3 in the same game. So a guy who can score rushing touchdowns at captain is important to think about. I just don't know how you can afford to fill the rest of your roster. The question is, can Kyler have such a high ceiling game that you don't need to have all of the highest probability guys in the flex? You can get away with a 7-point, $1,000 player, things like that. That's things to consider. But for me, I might have 1 or 2 lineups with him at captain. I just don't think it's going to work out too well. It's sort of a lottery ticket. I'd rather go with the middle of the field option, ownership wise and price wise. If we look at Russell Wilson's fantasy history this year, I mean, he was in the MVP conversations at the beginning of the year. I think towards the end of the year, both of these guys are going to be back in the MVP conversation. Looks like Russell is trending down slightly when it comes to that. He had a bad week last week against the Rams. Look, it's going to happen. It happens. Besides that game last week, he's had almost as good of a fantasy season as Kyler Murray. Not quite as high of a ceiling, but definitely getting the volume. His attempts are usually always above 35 or around 35 or more. And he's had one. He's actually gotten his rushing this year has been pretty good. He's had a couple 50 plus. He's had an 84-yarder. Hasn't really rushed for the touchdowns this year. But look, if your quarterback rushes for an extra 40 yards, that's like throwing an additional touchdown pass. So if they can get if Russell Wilson can throw for 3 touchdowns and rush for 40 yards, it's you're getting a big bonus by getting those extra rush yards for sure. So you go ahead, bro.
This is kind of a random thing, but Russell Wilson has 10 picks this year. He has the same amount of picks as Kyler Murray does rushing touchdowns. Like, that's just some perspective to put this into. Like, at no point, Kyler is having a historic season, right? This is the most ridiculous output we've seen from a quarterback, a dual threat quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I can't exclude Patrick Mahomes in his second year as a starter. So, I think it's crazy, man. Russell Wilson, you're exactly right. He's on a little bit of a downtrend. And here's the thing to keep in mind. Teams with good defenses are eventually going to beat these teams with really good offenses, but suck on defense. I mean, eventually you're not going to be able to overcome that at some point.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing with the Seahawks. I mean, if Russell Wilson isn't winning the game, they are not winning the game.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And
so it's just something to keep in mind.
We've seen the Cardinals pull out wins or at least keep the games very close if Kyler's having a slightly below average game. We've seen other players step up. We've seen big defensive plays from the Cardinals side. I'm not going to come out and say the Cardinals have a great defense, but they have a dynamic defense. They can cause
it's about
turnovers.
staying alive long enough to let your playmakers make plays. That's the same thing that we do in DFS, right? We're not trying to we're trying to manage our bankroll so that we can get that one big GPP hit.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for on these defenses or with elite offenses is you need to get that stop occasionally. And Seattle, I don't think is capable of getting those stops when they need them.
I agree. So moral of the story here, just play both these quarterbacks. And if you have the balls to throw 2 darts in the flex with Kyler or Russ at captain, do it. If there's some insight there that you think Jacob Hollister can go off for 2 touchdowns or something, one of these guys we're going to talk about, then go for it. In my opinion, I just prefer not to. You know, my philosophy is sort of this. We'll let Dwight explain it.
It's never the person you most suspect. It's also never the person you least suspect. Therefore, I know the killer to be the person I most medium suspect.
That's just that's my captain philosophy there. So we'll move on to running backs for the Cardinals. I think this is really interesting when it comes to fantasy wise. You've got Kenyon Drake, who's at 6,200, and you've got Chase Edmonds at 5,600. Looks like Kenyon Drake's doing he actually got injured against the Seahawks, and he played last week. He looked pretty good last week. Chase Edmonds is getting a majority of the routes run. He's getting a majority of the targets, but Kenyon Drake is your lead back in this game. And if you expect the Cardinals to be winning, or if you expect this to be a little bit more of a weather game, or maybe they can't pass the ball down the field as much just because of wind and rain, like I said, that's not a huge factor. But we saw this last weekend. We saw this last weekend that pretty much the weather can affect the outcome for sure. So if you think that there's going to be a lot of rain and stuff, Kenyon Drake is a good option, and his ownership is pretty low. I think he's coming in at under 25% total in the flex. So that's kind of something to keep an eye on here. Chase Edmonds is priced up quite a bit. He's at 5,600. I think he's a great option, and I don't actually hate playing both of these guys in the same lineup. They're both getting a good amount of volume. So if you can get basically all the rushing and any goal line, if you can fit Kyler, Kenyon, and Chase Edmonds in the same lineup, I think you can get a lot out of that. That you're capturing all the goal line opportunities, you're capturing all the backfield pass opportunities. Chase Edmonds can go off. I think he might be a little bit higher owned this week than he should be. So, Ellie, what are your thoughts on Drake versus Edmonds? And who are you prioritizing? Or are you just going to get a lot of both of these guys?
No, I'm probably not going to have a lot of both of these. I don't mind stacking both of them in the same lineup, but I may have a couple builds doing that. If it comes to just picking them head-to-head, I prefer Kenyon Drake. I expect that $600 price difference to give him the lower ownership here. And I think people are sleeping on Kenyon Drake, man. I mean, he's getting the volume. He's getting the yards fairly consistently. He's getting involved in the pass game. And I think I've said it every time the Cardinals have played a showdown or a primetime game is the thing that we need is a touchdown here or there.
Yeah.
It changes his entire fantasy output. You throw in a touchdown, 2-touchdown game, then all of a sudden this is a different player for fantasy especially. And I expect and anticipate a different kind of offense than what we've seen. Than what we saw at least in the last game. The Cardinals are going to need to establish the run if they want to be competitive in Seattle.
Yeah.
The worst thing that we can do, the Cardinals can do, remember I'm staying unbiased, is to let Russell Wilson get in a rhythm. And the easiest way to do that is to rely on that Seahawks defense to be the one that wins them the game. If that's the game script that ends up occurring, there's a very good chance the Cardinals can leave Seattle with a win. So I'm kind of banking on that when it comes to my builds. I know enough about how the coaching staff works on the Arizona side, and this is kind of what I expect for them to do. And again, to your point, Chase Edmonds is coming in a little bit higher owned than I anticipated. I still want some exposure, but I'm going to be under the field on Chase. He does present unique situations to stack him and Drake together simply because you're capturing so much of that backfield volume.
Yeah.
Chase could end up with 5 to 10 targets. Who knows? I mean, I think he had 7 targets, 7 receptions for like 83 yards against Seattle the last time they played. Now, granted, that is the game that Drake got injured, but I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And
Yeah.
I anticipate they may get him involved in the passing game. But I think both are in play. I'm going to be leaning towards Drake just because of the ownership leverage that you get.
So look, last week Kenyon Drake had 55% of the snaps. Chase Edmonds had 52%. Chase Edmonds had 21 routes run, and Kenyon Drake only had 7. But if you look at Kenyon Drake, he had 16 rush attempts to Chase Edmonds' 8. So it's obvious what's going on here. Obviously, they're using Kenyon Drake on first and second down, and then third down they're bringing Edmonds out, or any any second and long plays, things like that. He's getting those opportunities. Like I said, they're both getting a good amount of snaps. So if you can find some leverage by playing both of them, it's a handcuff, and it's suboptimal mostly. But on Showdown, you can do these kind of things. That's why I love Showdown, because you can get creative. You can put Kyler, Chase, and Kenyon Drake all in the same lineup potentially, and now you're capturing a shitload of volume. And you mix in a Christian Kirk in that lineup. You put Kirk, or you put Drake, or you put Edmonds at captain. Now you're able to afford 2 of the highest priced, or 2 high players for Seattle in that 4-2 stack. I think it provides a lot of leverage here. I like the Cardinals running back situation a ton more than Seattle's. Let's move on to Seattle's and actually look at this shit fest. So Chris Carson is at 8,400. Even if he was fully healthy, I don't think I would want to. He would be my fade. Like, if we knew that Chris Carson was fully healthy, I would fade him at 8,400, because you can't fit him in. I'd rather get Metcalf or Lockett or another mid-range player instead of Chris Carson at 8,400. You've got Carlos Hyde at 5,200. If Carson doesn't play, Carlos Hyde will be the starter. He'll get a lot of volume. But you've also got Alex Collins. Alex Collins looked really good last week. He got a lot of volume. 3,800 for Collins. It looks like Travis Homer is sort of the odd man out. Even if Carson doesn't play, I think Travis Homer is the odd man out, because you've got DJ Dallas that's getting a lot of those carries. So let's just rank it this way. So I'm assuming that Chris Carson's out. I'm going to rank it as Hyde is your first, second down back. He's in that role. He's the starter. At 5,200, that's a pretty good option. I don't love Hyde personally. And you've got Alex Collins sort of splitting snaps with Hyde in that same role. And then you got DJ Dallas coming in for, probably 30% of the snaps from there on third down, getting some receptions out of the backfield. So to me, Travis Homer is trending way down. I don't think you can play him at all. I know he's $800. But especially if Chris Carson does play, there's no way you can get any Travis Homer, because I think Alex Collins and DJ Dallas have surpassed him on the depth chart. How are you handling this shitfest here with 4 or 5 options that we can consider?
If Chris Carson plays, I don't think I'm touching any of the running backs. If Carlos Hyde plays, I don't think I'm touching any of the running backs. At 3,800, if both those guys are out, or honestly, I mean, if one of those guys are out, I think you might be okay running Alex Collins. I don't think he's in a terrible spot at 3,800. But again, I'm concerned that his carries will be extremely limited if either one, Hyde or Carson, plays. Now, he probably is a better back than Carlos Hyde, so hopefully Pete Carroll recognizes that and puts him in. I mean, he's a hell of a coach, so I don't see why he wouldn't. But if both guys are out, then I slightly disagree with you on Travis Homer. At $800, I don't think he's a terrible dart throw. The only reason why is because he gets involved in the pass game. So at 800, a reception or 2 receptions for 25 yards, 4.5 points. It's not the end of the world. But I still think DJ Dallas is a little bit more optimal given his tag, simply because he is probably going to get a goal line carry or 2. And he has the upside to have 10 to 12 carries if both these guys are out. So that's kind of how I'm going to be approaching this backfield, and then I'm going to go.
All right, we're going to move on to, let's look at a lot of his, let's look at these the actual snap rates here. So on this season, Alex Collins, Carlos Hyde, DJ Dallas, Travis Homer, it looks like it's in that order. In fact, when Hyde has been healthy, all these guys are averaging right around, between 30 to 37% of the snap rate this season. And it's hard to decipher because there's been a lot of injuries, but Travis Homer is only getting 23% of the snaps this year. So when you look at last week, Alex Collins had 52% of the snaps, DJ Dallas had 35%, and then Travis Homer had 11%. Now, it could have been a game script thing, but to me, with them losing last week, for a lot of that game, you would think Travis Homer would have gotten more opportunity. I just think he's trending down. DJ Dallas is a young player. They're going to want to use him, see what they got with him. Alex Collins was pretty good in Baltimore. They're going to try to prioritize him. This is just a personal opinion. I just don't love Travis Homer this week. And I don't love Carlos Hyde this week. If Carlos Hyde starts, I just personally I'd rather fade all the running backs. And spoiler alert, you're going to see in a minute how I feel about that. Anything else to add on this for the running back situation there, Ellie?
Hell no.
Okay. Let's move on to, we're going to go wide receivers for Seattle. So DK Metcalf's at 10.2K. He's priced actually down from what he was last time. Tyler Lockett is priced up a little bit. He's at 9,400. David Moore, 4,800, and Freddie Swain, probably a fringe player pool player. He's at 1,200. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett being only 800 difference, it's going to be hard to get both of these guys in the lineup. Traditionally speaking, you typically don't want to have both of them in a lineup anyways. One of them goes off, the other one sucks ass. That's usually been the theme for this year. So when it comes to Metcalf versus Lockett and all of the high price players on this slate, how the hell are you going to handle this? I mean, I don't see me getting a whole... it's going to scare me to death, but I don't know how I can get a lot of DK Metcalf this week. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be too high on DK Metcalf. Obviously, I'm going to get as much exposure to both these guys as I possibly can. But I honestly think the field is going to be doing the same thing. And it seems like ownership is leaning towards the Seattle side. And I have no problem getting different by stacking more Cardinals in this. And that's just because of the firepower of the offense. So, yes, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett can go off at any point. But I like David Moore at 4,800. I think he has a pretty good chance of getting involved in the passing attack. I don't think Freddie Swain is terrible. I probably won't end up playing any of them. Excuse me, but at 1,200, I don't know. You're gonna have to consider playing a guy like that at that price tag if you want to get Hop and one of these wide receivers. Now, to be fair, I don't think you can get Hop and Metcalf. So there may be a few lineups that have that stack, so you may be able to get different by fading maybe Russell Wilson.
You're gonna have to fade Russell. Yeah, you're gonna have to fade Russell.
Yeah. So I mean, again, you get into some really interesting builds here with the pricing being where it's at. And honestly, I just would rather have Russell Wilson. I mean, these guys can 100% go off for 50 points in a fantasy performance, but they could also go off for 0 to 4. And Russell Wilson is not going to do that. He has like a 22-point floor.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
If I'm going to pay for that, I'm putting him in. And honestly, given the ownership of these guys, you might be able to get a little leverage fading one or two of them. So that's where I'm at with this. If I end up with 90% of them and I like my builds, I'm not going to be upset about that either, though. Let's just be very clear. I just don't think I'm going to be able to force them in as much as I'd like to, given the way that my construction is looking currently.
So let's look at, now that this is their second matchup, obviously we remember the last game, great Sunday Night Football game. We covered that in one of our videos. One of the best games of the year, overtime win for the Cardinals. It was a crazy game. You got that Budda Baker interception, taking it down. You got DK Metcalf chasing him down. Just looked absolutely amazing. One of the best effort plays you'll ever see from a football player. DK Metcalf in that game, if you look, week 7 against Arizona, he only had 4.3 points. Now, it's a little deceptive because He was involved in the game. He was shut down for most of that game, but he had a touchdown callback in overtime to win the game on a screenplay. I think it was probably like a 40 or 50-yard touchdown, something like that, maybe even longer. That one play changes the whole dynamic of the whole game. Obviously, Seattle wins the game. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett go off in that game, technically. So, it's always hard to say, okay, you can't play these guys together because you just never know, and especially on a showdown slate, it's one of those things where these guys definitely can both go off. So 4.3 points against the Cardinals last week. Maybe people will see that and say, oh, or not last week, but last game. Maybe there'll be some bias towards that. I don't see that happening because he's such a good player. I don't think it really matters what he did against the Cardinals last time. But when you look at Lockett, one of the best fantasy performances of the entire season. And that was I called him as my captain that week. It worked out pretty well. 56 points against the Cardinals. He had 15 receptions on 20 targets, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So what an amazing game. It's one of those games you get only a few times in your career, but he has the upside to accomplish that, something like that again. You see a 40-point game earlier in the year. The first 3 weeks did pretty well, had a couple of average games, and he hasn't really done anything since. But look, if you get a guy at 9,400 that scores only 11 fantasy points, probably not going to be in a winning lineup. That's just the way it is, especially in a high total. So it's boom or bust for, in my opinion, Tyler Lockett is a tournament play. I mean, it's pretty obvious. DK Metcalf to me is a safer play. I feel like he's going to get the volume. He has a better opportunity to forcibly make receptions when the defenders are in his face. Maybe if Russell's having a bad game, DK Metcalf has the option to go up there and really change the game and make a lot of catches. But at 10.2K, it's going to be really difficult. You're going to have to make a tough decision. I think if you with the salary this week, if you do 4-2 stacks with Arizona and have 2 Seattle players, you just fit in Metcalf and Russ, or you fit in Tyler Lockett and Russ and sort of build from there. That's a simplistic way of thinking, but just with the prices, I feel like there's way more value on Arizona's side. And considering that the Seattle defense is terrible, absolutely terrible, I think the Cardinals have a higher fantasy output this week, in my opinion. So when it comes to David Moore, I think he's a good option. I think at 4,800, he could be one of those sneaky plays that you might need to get in order to build what you need in order to have all these high-priced players in there. At 4,800, I can easily see him catching 2 touchdowns. He's one of those guys that all the attention is paid to DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and he's the one who gets open in the corner of the end zone. He's the kind of guy that can have those big games, especially against the Cardinals that give up big plays. So let's move on to the Arizona side of the ball here. You got DeAndre Hopkins at 10.8K. He's obviously trending up. Had one of the best plays. He had the best play of the season and one of the best plays in the last 5 years. I mean, catching a Hail Mary pass like that over 3 defenders, that's some Calvin Johnson shit. That's, some of the best wide receivers to ever play can't make that catch. So it's lifted him into conversations as being the top wide receiver in the NFL. His price is reflecting that. The interesting thing here is you have Christian Kirk at 7,400. Now, last game against Seattle, Kirk went off. He had that fingertip touchdown reception. He ended up with 20 points in that game. He had 2 touchdowns on only 37 yards. He's had some decent games he's trending up for sure. He didn't have a great game last week for whatever reason, but he has that upside. He's what Andy Isabella should be. Like, Andy Isabella should be getting these numbers. He's at, Isabella's the fast home run hitter, but Christian Kirk is that guy this year, and he's doing pretty well. At 7,400, he's middle of the pack. He could be exactly what you need to build a winning lineup, simply because I think he's going to get forgotten. Like we said earlier, I think he's projected right now for less than 5% ownership. That's going to change. There's no chance. I think he'll be around 10, maybe under 15, simply because of his price tag. You have to make a tough decision to get Christian Kirk. Who do you have to leave off? Do you have to leave off Kyler? Do you have to leave off Russ? Wouldn't you rather have DK over Christian? Well, yeah, of course. But Christian Kirk can get you 25 fantasy points and allow you to really have a unique roster construction. Even throwing him in at captain can be a huge savings. You know, he's $3,000, $2,000 less than a lot of these expensive guys. That extra $2,000 in the captain can really help you get up to some of these mid-range guys and not have to throw a punt on a $1,000 guy. You got Larry Fitzgerald, who obviously he's limited. He's at a point in his career where he's limited, but he's getting a ton of volume. If we look at his snap rate, you know, for the season, it's pretty high, and his snap rate last week was high as well. So he's at 80% snap rate this season. DeAndre Hopkins is at 93%. But last week he was on the Larry Fitz was on the field for 90% of the snaps. Excuse me. He ran 38 routes last week. Hopkins ran 40. He's not being as targeted as much, but a guy like Kyler, who's running around in trouble a lot of times, needs a safe option across the middle. To me, Larry Fitzgerald is like the equivalent of a good tight end. Especially for a young quarterback, he's a safety net. Fitzgerald at that price tag at $4,400, he has the opportunity to catch a touchdown or two going across the middle and maybe end up with 6-7 receptions in a game like this where it can be high scoring and crazy. You got Andy Isabella at 2,000 who is a straight up dart throw. He either scores you 2 touchdowns and has a 90-yard touchdown, or he gets no targets. There's no in between with him. So at 2,000, you might need a guy like that, but I'm not going to have a whole lot of him. Talk to me about your side of it. How do you handle these 4 wide receivers?
So the first one that we need to talk about, obviously, is DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not sure what to say here other than if you can put him in your lineups, put him in your lineups. I prefer him over Lockett. I prefer him over DK, but he's obviously priced like that. So that's going to cause, issues building.
And we're on DraftKings. It's full point PPR. So just him getting 10 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown, he's going to be in the optimal. I don't care what his price tag is. You get those 10
exactly.
points just from his targets or from his receptions. It's a no-brainer.
And yeah, look, guys, again, keep an eye on the ownership. If Christian Kirk is anywhere near under 20%, that's my mark. Under 20%, and that might be being generous. You need to put him in as many lineups as you can. At 7,400, He has just as much upside as Hop, as DK, and as Lockett.
Yeah.
I understand we're probably not going to get a 53 or a 58 point performance out of him, but if I'm looking at anybody on the slate that's capable of doing it, he's up there. I mean, he's going to be up there in that kind of output. And at 7,400, he's not priced like he has that kind of upside. And again, I expect ownership to shift. There's really no way that he's going to stay sub 5% owned. But I love him. I absolutely love him, and he gives you all kinds of flexibility, whether you play him at captain in the flex. And to be frank, I mean, you might be able to get away with fading all the high priced wide receivers in this game and just going with kind of middle of the pack and forcing in the quarterbacks to every lineup.
Yeah.
So I think he gives you some unique builds. Now, if you are going to go the way of putting in those expensive guys, like I will, I'm not going to only do Christian Kirk lineups, by the way. I will have the other guys as well. I think Larry Fitzgerald becomes an interesting play. Yes, he's going to have more of a safe floor as opposed to a high ceiling, but he's capable of scoring touchdowns, and he is a go-to guy. If this game comes close, remember, it's Larry Fitzgerald that kept him in the game and allowed us to score that field goal to tie it the last time we played Seattle. It's the little things that he does that encourages Kyler Murray to get him involved. If we're in the 2-minute offense and you need to get down the field, you throw it to him because he's gonna play the disciplined ball where you get it to a rep, you get it down so you can get into the next play. Those are things that add to your target count in football that are kind of intangible that you're not going to see on the stat sheet.
Yeah.
So if you think this game is competitive, there is a chance that Fitz is going to be required to kind of anchor some of the offensive output. Then moving on to Andy Isabella, he's 100% a dart throw. I like him just because he can take the top off defense, and the Seahawks defense sucks. Like, they are just god awful. And with Jamal Adams being back, I expect him to be, looking more towards the bigger names, right? You got Hop and you got Kirk. And even Larry Fitzgerald, I think he's going to be looking out more for those guys than worrying about Andy Isabella running up the seam. So he is a flyer that you can take. I don't suggest getting more than 2 or 3 lineups with him. That's going to be probably triple or quadruple the exposure to the field. But you're gonna have to find some value on this slate if you're gonna start jamming in all these high price guys. So I think he is in play this week. And again, he has high upside, but he also has a flat out floor of 0.
Yeah. I mean, look, if he comes in around 15 to 20% owned, I'll probably be slightly under the field, maybe right around 15% with him, just to because he has that upside. He has that one play for 85-yard touchdown, and then maybe you don't see him the rest of the game. But at $2,000, if he scores you 15 fantasy points, he'll be in the optimal, especially with all the restrictions this week, for sure. So I mean, if you look at Larry Fitzgerald, look, I know he's priced at $4,400, so it's not ideal, but he might be right there. He might be right where you need him. He has 246 consecutive games with a catch. That's an amazing stat line. So you can pretty much guarantee he's going to get you a couple catches, probably 2 or 3. He has a decent floor. So if you roster Larry Fitzgerald and he ends up with 4 catches for 50, 60 yards, you're probably not going to be he's probably not going to be in a winning lineup, but it's very possible that you can at least cash with 50 or 75% of your lineups or whatever that is. So keep an eye on these guys. I think Fitzgerald and Kirk might be necessary on this slate because of the ownership and because of the pricing. You get a little bit of a discount, and they also have a high ceiling. We can't fit all these wide receivers in, so we got to make a decision. So let's move over to tight end. Ellie, we've got...
I need you to take over for just a second.
All right,
sorry, guys.
Do your thing, bro. So we're going to go to tight end. So we got Dan Arnold. Looks like Dan Arnold is trending up. He had a pretty good game last week. He had 4 targets, 4 receptions for 34 yards. He has no touchdowns this year, which is a little frustrating, but 1 touchdown really changes his outlook. He has a 57-yard game against the Seahawks last game they played. I think he gets the targets. He's getting between 2 to 4 targets. It's absolutely a dart throw, like for sure. But at 2,200, I feel better about. I feel much better about Dan Arnold than I do about Isabella. Like, what do you think about that, Ellie? Like, Arnold versus Isabella, I'd rather go Arnold all day.
Yeah, especially after Arnold's output on Sunday, it looks like Kyler Murray was starting to get a little bit more comfortable with him. And it seems like he might be able to slip behind some of the defenses because, again, I mean, you're worried about some of the big play output that this offense has the potential of hitting. So I'm right there with you, man. I like Dan Arnold, and as we get closer to the slate, I think he becomes more in play, especially if we get news that Darrell Daniels is out.
All right, so Max Williams is an option here, in my opinion. He is at 1,400. He has a pretty good chance of catching a touchdown in this game. The Cardinals target him in the red zone quite a bit. If you look at his history here with the Cardinals, in week 9, he just got off the IR. He's been injured basically the whole season. Week 9, he had 1 reception for 4 yards and a touchdown. He wasn't really. He didn't. Did he play last week? I'm not sure, but 1,400 for Max Williams is an absolute option. I think you have to spread these guys around. You have to spread the Arnolds. You have to spread the Isabellas, the Max Williams. Try to get one of these guys in a lot of your lineups and just sort of spread yourself out. And don't go too high over the field. Look, Max Williams at 8% owned. If you get 15% Max Williams, you have a lot of leverage if he scores a touchdown. You don't need, if you have a good take on Max Williams, you don't need to get 20% of him in your lineup. But at 1,400, it really allows you to get a lot of the best players on the slate. Darrell Daniels, I don't think he's an option this week. He's hurt. I don't think you can really consider him. With Seattle, you got Greg Olsen, Will Dissly, Jacob Hollister. So Greg Olsen's at 3,600. It's a good price for him. Traditionally, the Cardinals don't, when you see the Cardinals, you find the opposing team's tight end and you just start them. Well, I think they're getting a little bit better. They have some dynamic linebackers. They got, they have some defenders like Budda Baker. They got guys that can cover these tight ends one-on-one. So I think this year they've been doing a little bit better against them, but they're still pretty bad against the tight ends, generally speaking. So Greg Olsen, Will Dissly, Jacob Hollister, I think they're all in play. I think Will Dissly at 1,800 might be the guy that breaks the slate this week. If we look at him, basically all three of these guys had opportunity against the Cardinals last time they played. They all sort of got 3 receptions, 2 receptions for 30 yards or whatever it is. It looks like Will Dissly was targeted 4 times, 2 receptions and 38 yards. It's not nothing to write home about, but if Will Dissly can get you 3 or 4 receptions and a random touchdown, that's going to break the slate on a slate like this at 1,800 because you can just fit in all the pieces around him. Greg Olsen at 3,600, nothing to write home about. But like I said, all these guys are in play against the Cardinals. They're all in play. Any of these guys can go off. Russell Wilson seems to trust Greg Olsen a little bit, but there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. And I think all 3 of these guys are going to be forgotten when it comes to ownership. A guy like Jacob Hollister is coming in, around 15 to 20% owned. I think he's going to be over-owned, but at $1,000, I feel pretty comfortable with throwing him in a couple lineups for sure because all 3 of these guys can go off for sure. Ellie, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. Again, I think the key here is you don't want multiple in the same lineup, and I'm not sure that takes a DFS analyst or expert by any means to advise, but I think all 3 are in play. Greg Olsen, being at 3,600 isn't an awful price tag for a tight end, starting tight end, especially with the capability that he has to take down a touchdown pass in the end zone. I mean, if he has one target for 12 yards and a touchdown, that's you pretty much paid off 3,600. But I'm with you on Will Dissly. I'm going to have a healthy exposure here because, again, we're looking for those guys in this price range that are going to be able to, give us some flexibility to start throwing in some of these high-priced guys. And they're low enough owned that I think that you don't have to get as crazy in some of the other positions. And if you're running a medium-priced captain, you may have low enough ownership across the board that even with some of the chalkier plays, you're only looking at a handful of dupes. So I like all 3 of these guys. All 3 of them are in play. And I think you can kind of just have equal exposure. Unless, again, of course, like you're saying with Jacob Hollister, if he sits around the 20 to 25% mark, I do find that a little bit high for a guy with as low output as we're expecting from him.
Yeah.
But he does have the upside to grab a touchdown. So again, I think it's interesting at ownership. And if Will Dissly is kind of middle of the pack when it comes to ownership here, I think he's my primary play from this tight end group.
Yeah, I like him a lot too, for sure. And you got to remember, Will Dissly, before he got injured last year, he was the number 1 guy on this team from a fantasy aspect. We were playing him every week. He was sort of chalk for a lot of fantasy slates. Will Dissly was the guy. So you can't forget about that. He's the same player. He is hurt. He's trying to work his way back into this offense. It's a little bit different dynamic this year. But I think you can definitely consider playing Will Dissly. He has a higher upside than his numbers state for this year, for sure. Let's move on to kickers and defense. What's interesting this week? You're gonna have to plug in some kickers and defenses this week, unless you're willing to take shots on some other dart throws around that price. You've got Zane Gonzalez at 4,200, and you've got Jason Myers at 4,000 flat. Me personally, I don't think I want to waste for tournaments and large field tournaments. They just don't have the ceiling that I'm looking for in a game like this with a 47.5 or a 57.5 total. Yeah, they're going to score their 9 or 10 fantasy points, but at 4,000, I don't think that's going to be enough. I think there's other players in this range that can hit you a higher ceiling. It's a riskier play, but if anything, I would consider in this game potentially getting 1 or 2 lineups with the kickers and a captain, just in case if they go off. But having them in the flex, I just feel like it's limiting your ceiling. Having them in the captain is actually more of a benefit, because if they do absolutely go off, you could afford to get the Russell Wilsons and all those big time players. Now listen, I'm not going to get 20% of my lineups with kickers and captain. I might have 1 or 2 at most, depending on where their ownership comes in. But me personally, I'm not a huge fan of the kickers this week. And when it comes to defense, Ellie, let's talk about defense. You got Cardinals at 3,200, and you've got Seahawks at 2,800. I actually really like the defenses this week. I know it's a high scoring game, but look, when it comes to defenses and DFS and just fantasy in general, you're looking for interceptions for touchdowns, you're looking for sacks, you're looking for fumbles for touchdowns, you're looking for big plays. Even if this game hits the under and there's no big defensive plays, they're not worth playing. So you're looking for dynamic defenses that can pick the ball off, and you're looking for quarterbacks that can make mistakes. Now, look, Russell Wilson's a great quarterback, but he can make mistakes. Both of these quarterbacks are dynamic. They make plays in the pocket. They also make mistakes on occasion. Can I see Kyler Murray, scrambling around and fumbling the ball, and Seattle picking it up and running for a touchdown? Absolutely. I can see the same thing with Russell Wilson. I mean, look, that famous play from the Sunday night game. Russell Wilson's not perfect. He's a great quarterback. He's a great guy. You root for him, but he makes mistakes on occasion. He's not perfect. Every quarterback makes mistakes. And we saw Budda Baker almost take one to the house if it wasn't for a crazy-ass play. I actually am going to go higher on the defenses than the ownership. I mean, look, the Cardinals defense comes in at 4% owned. I don't know why the Seahawks are coming in above 10% ownership, in my opinion. I'd rather go with Cardinals defense. Yeah, they're going to give up 30 points. Does not matter. It does not matter. If they end up with 4 sacks, interception for a touchdown, and randomly a punt return or something that goes off, they're going to be in the optimal. How are you handling the defenses this week, Ellie?
Yeah, I don't mind having some exposure to them. I think it's going to be interesting, depending on how the game plays out. But I think the Cardinals have the opportunity for sacks and potentially an interception here or there. And you're exactly right. I mean, if DK Metcalf doesn't run that play down, all of a sudden, the Cardinals defense, it goes from 8 points on that Thursday night game or Sunday night game to 14 points. And granted, that may not have been optimal in that particular setup, but I'm pretty sure I had somebody in one of my winning lineups that was closer to like 10 points. I'll have to pull up my history on that and see where it's at. But yeah, I think they're very much in play. And again, I mean, this is completely a leverage play. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of upside here. It's going to be a very high risk play given the total that we're looking at. But again, I mean, at 4% owned, right? I mean, you got to find a way to get different. And again, pay attention to narrative. I think football is the one sport where you can actually adjust for narrative a little bit. The Cardinals have a great a defense when it comes to stopping teams from scoring, right? They may give up yards, they may give up this or that, but it doesn't matter, especially in DFS. You want to be holding your opponent to field goals. Now, I understand they do give up points, but that's because of the amount of drives that they have to endure, right? I mean, when you're scoring 31 points on offense, you're going to give the opponent a chance to score.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what we're looking at here, and that's how I'll be approaching this build.
All right, let's move on to our fades of the night. Ellie, go ahead. Yours is Chase Edmonds. Tell us about that.
Yeah, man. Chase Edmonds, I think he's a little bit chalky. I think he's going to be splitting touches again, and he's still a little bit more expensive than I'd like him to be. So I'm probably going to have to limit my exposure there. I like Kenyon Drake better, and I think he has potential to score a lot more points.
So let's clarify. When we say fade of the night, we're not getting 0 of these guys in our lineups, and potentially we're going to end up with, a little bit under the field. If Chase Edmonds comes in at 30% owned, maybe we'll get 25%, a little bit under the field. That's why we, and sometimes in a lot of, to be honest, it just depends on the ownership and how the builds go on the day. But a lot of times you might end up with 0% of these guys. It just depends. basically what we're saying is we're going to come in under the field, and we're not high on these players based on salary, based on opportunity. For me, Seattle's running backs, it's a shit show. I don't know how to. It's worse than the Patriots situation by far, in my opinion. At least with the Patriots, you know that James White and Rex Burkhead are going to get opportunity. I don't know who's going to get opportunity here, especially if Chris Carson plays, which I don't think he will. If he does play, I don't want anything to do with any of these running backs. So just keep an eye on the injury situation. I'd rather go with wide receivers in a 57.5 point total. And when both quarterbacks can run the ball, that's another thing. You're going to get some goal line opportunities taken away by the quarterbacks when both quarterbacks can run the ball. So, all right, we did a little remix to our typical captain choices this week. We're going to call it.
Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
So we're crowning their ass at captain on DraftKings. Ellie, tell me about your pick of Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it a lot here. I think he's just in a great pricing spot, so it gives you a little bit of flexibility to do what you need to do for all these teams. So I really want to jam him in there so that I can work in Christian Kirk. I can work in both quarterbacks, and I kind of only have to rotate one or two cheaper guys in to get too risky. And like we were talking about a little bit earlier in the show, the safest thing that we can do here, and I know safe usually correlates better to cash, but in particular, it's been working for us. This has been our strategy the whole season, right? Other than maybe Tyler Lockett on the Sunday night, and then Dalvin Cook just locking him into flex, right? Other than probably those two picks, we're getting different here so that we can be kind of chalky in the body of the build. And that's what I think is going to help us here, especially with his price tag and his current projected ownership. He's sub 15%. Again, you don't have to get crazy if you're playing one of these guys at captain. So I'm not saying if you're doing a 150 max to go in there and jam in 150 lineups with Kenyon Drake at captain. If the field is going to be at 10%, you need 20, double it up, double the field. You're sitting at 20% and run the rest of your lineups with Tyler Lockett or Kyler Murray, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
But you're getting that leverage that you need to try and get a takedown in a good opportunity.
Look, right now, Kenyon Drake is projected for under 3% in the captain. That's fucking stupid. To me, I'm going to use that as heavy leverage for a starting running back on a team that is only is basically they're underdogs because they're on the road. You know what I mean? That's pretty much the only. It's a pick 'em at this point. And Kenyon Drake getting a lot of opportunity and only at 3% in the captain. I know he's middle of the road when it comes to salary, which is really nice. And that leads us to Christian Kirk. In my opinion, Christian Kirk at 7,400. He's gonna get forgotten. I don't think his ownership is gonna be as low as it is now, but he's projecting for under 5%. I think he'll end up around 3 or 4% in the captain. And I think it's just too low. And at his price tag, I could fit in 3 high price guys, and then you got to get creative from there. Christian Kirk can absolutely go off. He's the kind of guy that can get you a 70-yard touchdown, score multiple touchdowns in one game, especially on a Thursday night. We're under the lights. Both these teams are going to come out passing the ball. Kirk is my choice. All right, let's get into building a lineup real quick. We have a couple minutes here. Let's go ahead and build a lineup together. We're going to build one lineup this week. Let's see. Let's get into that. Ellie, who should we start with at captain?
I want to do Kenyon Drake. I have a build that I kind of built on the side here. I'm pretty sure you're going to end up landing on the same build anyways with Kenyon. So
so what are we doing? A 4-2 Cardinals in this case?
Yeah, it's going to be 4-2 Cardinals.
All right, so Kyler and I'm assuming Russell Wilson, just jam those guys into every one of your lineups as your bedrock and go from there. So where are we going next?
I want to get your captain pick into my flex here. So Christian Kirk.
Okay, love it. Okay, so we got one more Cardinal, one more Seattle.
So I think I think you called it at the tight end spot. I think this is a great option for our run back with the Seattle side. I think we can pair up pretty nicely with Disley. What are your thoughts there?
I love it, dude. Wilson and Disley. we're going to go off the fact that we need Disley at 1.8K to fit all these guys in. But now, but you have Russell Wilson who can spread the ball around. Even if he throws a touchdown pass to Lockett, even if he throws it to DK Metcalf, doesn't mean DK Metcalf and Lockett are going to be in the optimal. Well, we're capturing all that from Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson gets a rushing touchdown and throws a touchdown to Will Disley, this could end up working out for us. So one more position here. We got to run it back with a Cardinal to complete this 4-2. We have 6,700 left. Who can we get here?
We're probably going to leave a little bit of salary on the table here, but I think we go with the guy with my fate of the night.
Dude,
throwing Chase.
I love it. You got Drake, who can capture a lot of offense here. So you're covering all the rushing side of the Cardinals, which I think is what you want to do in this game. But you also have the upside of Christian Kirk. Now this is going to be a really low owned. No one's going to build this. You're fading Lockett, you're fading DK, you're fading Hopkins. Now look, can this go wrong? Absolutely. I would consider this lineup
100%.
I would consider this lineup a milli maker lineup, like 100%. Like I would totally be comfortable entering this, and this could win you $1 million. This kind of lineup. Now, is it high probability? Hell no.
Yeah, this is a dead last lineup too.
This is a first or last. This is a Ricky Bobby situation here. You're either gonna win first place, or you're gonna get last. Now, do I expect you to have every single one of your lineups be like this? If you're building 20 lineups, let's just say, I don't expect you to have every lineup like this, because you want to get 50 to 75% of your bankroll back. That's how you continue to play the whole year and just waiting to get that first place. But a lineup like this, if I had to enter one bullet into the milli maker, I would do something like this, and I'd remix it a little bit. I'd massage it, but I don't think that you're going to get any dupes with a lineup like this for sure. All right, Ellie, send us out. What are your thoughts on this game? How do you think it ends up? What's your final score prediction?
I'm going to stick with my original thought here. I think we're going to be. I'm just going to go throwback. We're talking 2009 Packers Cardinals. I'm expecting something like 53-51. Let's just shoot for it. Let's have a fucking offensive night.
Yeah, say that again. Sorry, I blanked out on you. What'd you say? What was your final score there?
53-51.
Damn, hell yeah, dude. I love it. Let's do it. I'm gonna put this at a little bit under. I think both teams are coming in off of a crazy week. Seattle had a bad loss. They're gonna be motivated to bounce back. Cardinals had a huge win. They're gonna be really high. So who knows what happens in this game. I think I'm gonna put this around 35-28. It's gonna be a close game. When you division games, anything can happen. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this hit the under. I hope it doesn't, from a fantasy aspect and just from watching football. But we don't know what can happen. Anything can happen. Anything to send us off with there, Ellie?
No, man. I'm just excited for the game. You got any cool videos for us though?
I don't. I didn't put that in there. Sorry. We're referring to the. Tell us what video you're talking about. Go on YouTube and look this video up. It's the Drew Stanton video. What year was that?
2015,
I think.
Yeah, 2015. I mean, the last time the Cardinals were relevant, we won. Andre Ellington. Just go look up Andre Ellington, Drew Stanton dance.
Seattle, Drew Stanton dance. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Like I said, we're going to be back next week with 3 showdown slates. Obviously, we're going to have our Sunday night and Monday night as well. And then for Thanksgiving, we're going to have 3 separate videos for those Thanksgiving days. So like, subscribe, help us out. We really appreciate it. And we're going to see you guys for Sunday Night Football. Thanks a lot, guys.